What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I want to talk to you about a book that I read today, Wonder Woman, Earth 1. This is written by Grant Morrison with art by Yannick Paquette and Nathan Fairbairn. This is part of DC Comics Earth 1 line, and I'm pretty sure this book has been ready to come out for a little while, but DC Comics kept pushing the release date further and further away. I'm pretty sure to line it up with the Batman vs. Superman movie. That movie had Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and a lot of people that I saw on the internet were saying, well, this movie was okay, or they didn't really like the movie, but they really did like Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. And so now, any of those people who said that after they saw the movie, they can go to their local bookstore or comic book shop, and there will be a brand new Wonder Woman in the comics for them to sink their teeth into. And the big reason that I got excited for this book when they first announced it, like in 2014, was that Grant Morrison was going to be writing this. I am a huge Grant Morrison fan. Not so much now as I was like 5 to 7 years ago, but I still like a lot of what he's written. And I was thinking, okay, I'm not a huge Wonder Woman fan, but I am a big Grant Morrison fan, so maybe he will make me interested in his version of Wonder Woman. And since this book was announced, I have become a little bit more of a Wonder Woman fan. I read the first couple, maybe the first year of John Byrne's run, the first year of the George Perez run, about a year from the William Mesder-Loeb's run. I've read a few stories here and there. Some of what I read I really liked, some of it I didn't like as much. And if I wanted to compare this to a lot of the other stuff I've read, I would say it's about middle of the road. For one thing, I was a little disappointed that Grant Morrison didn't let his weirdness really just run wild here. He is one of those guys who's really well known for taking these extremely strange and completely out there ideas and just running with it, and usually it works very well for him. Occasionally, he will do something that's a little bit more tame than some of his other work, but most of the time, he's known for just taking these really bizarre out there ideas and making them work. And I was really expecting him to do that here, but he doesn't. This is a pretty tame story compared to a lot of Morrison's other works. And as far as another kind of complaint that I have here, this is also origin territory, which we were probably expecting that. I think most people who knew that this was coming, they were expecting it to be origin stuff, because most of these Earth 1 books have been origin stuff. And I am familiar with a few of the other Wonder Woman origins out there. I read the William Moulton Marston version back when I was in high school. I've seen the first episode of the Linda Carter TV show. I read the George Perez reboot from the mid-'80s, and then I watched the animated movie from about 2009 or so. And some of those stories I liked, some of them I didn't. And this book, it hits a lot of the same elements as those other origin stories, but it does it in a very different way. It still is getting her from point A to point B. All of the origin stories, including this one, have her, when she starts off, she's a very sheltered princess on this island full of women. It's a paradise, but she wants more in life. And then point B, she's a superhero in man's world. All of the origin stories are just getting her from point A to point B. This one is different in the way that it gets her from point A to point B. Almost all of those other stories, they have Steve Trevor accidentally lands on Themyscira, and then the Amazons, they're a little bit angry that he's there. They're not really welcoming, but they're not super hostile toward him either. And they have a contest to decide who's going to take him back to man's world. Diana infiltrates the contest, and then her mom's like, oh, well, I can't do anything to stop you. And then she takes him back to man's world, and then something happens where she decides, okay, I'm going to stay in man's world, and I'm going to be an ambassador slash warrior slash superhero. And then that's usually the story as it happens. This story has a lot of those elements, but it's a little different in how it handles some of those elements. For example, here, Steve Trevor did not accidentally find this island. He was sent on a mission to find this island that the U.S. government believed that they had been hearing rumors about since World War II. He finds the island, and then he changes his mind, and he tells his superiors, no, there is no island. I just found this one woman. But then you've also got the Amazons. They are a lot more hostile towards Diana whenever she leaves their island. And by the way, here, I keep calling it this island because pretty much since the George Perez reboot in the mid-'80s, it's been called Themyscira. Here, Morrison calls it Amazonia, and all of the inhabitants, they are either Amazons or they are Wonder Women. So whenever Diana starts calling herself Wonder Woman by the end of the book, it doesn't completely come out of nowhere, because all of the people from Amazonia are called Wonder Women. So I thought that was kind of a neat little twist on the island. But anyway, here, whenever Queen Hippolyta and the other Amazons find out that there is a man and that Diana is trying to sneak him off the island and take him back home, they're all like, okay, we gotta kill him right now. And then they're like, openly at war with Diana because she's breaking their laws and traditions. And Diana still competes in the contest, but here, instead of it being a one-time thing to decide who's going to take this man back to man's world, since these people hate this guy and they want to kill him without actually meeting him, instead of it being that, the contest is a yearly thing, and they've got this lion mask that Hercules wore whenever he had kidnapped Hippolyta. And every year they have a woman, I guess it's Diana. That's where I'm a little unsure. I think Diana is Hercules every year. She plays Hercules, and then they have this play where Hercules, he bends his will to the will of the Amazons, and he submits to them lovingly. That's what they call it. And every year they kind of have this festival where everybody gets really drunk and has sex with each other, and then they watch this play where Mala, who is Wonder Woman's girlfriend, she defeats Hercules. Well, this year, Diana says, okay, I'm done, I'm not going to do that. So she defeats Mala, and everybody's kind of like, this isn't how it's supposed to happen. And then she's like, well, as the new champion, I get to have Mala's invisible airplane. And she takes the airplane, and then she gets Steve Trevor off the island. And then Hippolyta is like, okay, since my daughter is being a rebellious teenager, and I don't like that, I'm going to send Medusa off to man's world, and she's going to turn people to stone until my daughter comes back home. And then the rest of the story is the trial of Diana. In fact, the trial actually starts very early on here. Most of the story is going back and forth between the trial and then what these characters are talking about at the trial, which is stuff that happened prior to the trial. And it's a pretty okay story. I'm more interested in seeing what will come next. If Grant Morrison and Paquette, Yannick Paquette, are going to do a Volume 2, what are they going to do in Volume 2? Because we see the Wonder Woman origin story a lot, or at least I see it a lot. I would say over half of the stories that I've read have been Wonder Woman origin stories, and we don't usually get to see as much of what she does once she comes to man's world, or at least I haven't seen as much of that. So I'm very interested to see how is Morrison going to take the Amazonian politics and apply it to a character who's actively trying to take those political ideas and apply them to man's world, a world that is going to be resisting those ideas. I want to see that in action, and we get to see a very little bit of it here, but not nearly as much as you might think. But overall, I thought this story was okay. Like I said, it is origin story, but fortunately, it's a very different origin than what we usually see with Wonder Woman. There's some interesting ideas. Grant Morrison, he is very interested in taking things back to their roots with William Moulton Marston, and in some ways, he's returning things to their roots. In other ways, he's kind of updating and modifying things a little bit. The big thing is that he returns this idea that the Amazons have bondage as part of their sexual rights. And here, Diana's like, well, if somebody willingly submits to someone else, then that is an act of strength and love. And then they get bound up and then they have sex. And at one point, she wants Steve Trevor to submit to her and bow down to her. And he's like very weirded out by it, like, no, I'm not going to do that. And she's very confused by it. And I was very confused by it, not because she wants to bring bondage into it, because I was pretty sure Grant Morrison was going to do that. I think I had read some interviews with him where he was talking about all these ideas of bondage and how William Moulton Marston was really ahead of his time. So I wasn't confused by that. I was confused that she wants to have sex with Steve Trevor. This is a guy who she's known for less than a day, and already she's like, okay, I want you to have sex with me, but first you have to get on your knees and let me tie you up. And I was a little confused by that, but also, this is the first Wonder Woman who's bisexual. That's a thing that a lot of people have been very fervently, passionately fighting for. Wonder Woman who is a lesbian, because it kind of makes sense that she would be. She's lived on an island full of women with absolutely no men for her entire life, and these other women, for like 3,000 years they've lived on this island, so it would make a lot of sense for them to be lesbians, and they really wouldn't have any heterosexual sex on this island because there's no men. And this is a Diana who is at the very least bisexual. She seems to be interested in Steve Trevor, but she's also got a girlfriend, Mala, and I think that's something that makes sense. That's one of those things that a lot of people have kind of been thinking that should be updated into Wonder Woman's character for a very long time. Well, here it's finally updated. So if you're one of those people who you've been thinking that Wonder Woman should be gay or bisexual for a very long time, it's finally canon, at least in the Earth 1 books. Also, you've got some other references to Wonder Woman lore that I'm very interested to see those play out, if they do play out, in future volumes. For example, you've got a version of Donna Troy. She's actually here on the cover cover. That's her right there. She's kind of got the old costume from the late 70s, early 80s, I think from the Teen Titans comics. And then also, she comes from a sister island, which is an idea that I think George Perez created in his run, where there was Themyscira, and then there was another island with a little bit more of a warlike race of women. And Artemis also comes from this sister island in the George Perez run, and also in this version of the story, Artemis Troya, as she's called here, and I believe the cheetah. They all come from this sister island, and they come here once a year to participate in the games, and they fight Mala, who's the champion from Amazonia, as it's called here. But I like the idea of having Troya and the cheetah come from this sister island. Right off the bat, it looks like we've already got a little bit more of a simple, easier to understand origin story for Donna Troy. She's always had this huge mess of an origin story that very rarely makes any sense at all. So I like the idea of her coming from this sister island. I am curious if she's going to be used in later volumes here, and I'm also curious if we are going to see a connection between this book and Teen Titans Earth 1. The big question that a lot of people have kind of been curious about since they first announced they were going to be doing multiple Earth 1 books is, are all of these books going to be part of the same world, kind of like the Ultimate Universe comics from Marvel Comics? And I don't think they are, because Jeff Lemire said that Teen Titans Earth 1 takes place on a world without adult superheroes, and he was very careful in Volume 1 to choose a whole lot of Teen Titans characters who don't have adult counterparts. He got like Cyborg and Raven and Terra, all these characters who are not sidekicks. But then in the artwork for Volume 2, it looks like we're going to have a Wonder Girl in Volume 2. So I'm very curious if that's going to be a connection to this book, or if it's going to be an entirely different Wonder Girl who has nothing to do with what Grant Morrison is doing here. I have a feeling it's going to be a completely different thing, and Teen Titans Earth 1 is its own thing, and all these Earth 1 books are kind of sort of their own thing. Although I think I remember hearing someone say that there was a reference to Batman in one of the Superman Earth 1 sequels, so who knows. But overall, I thought this book was pretty okay. Not as radical as I was hoping it would be under the hand of Grant Morrison, but this might be one of my favorite Wonder Woman origin stories. It does have a few minor issues with it, not big problems, but issues like I still don't really like Hippolyta. She's a character I've never really liked. Here, she is just straight up villainous. At the end of the book, her and Diana kind of reconcile, but she is sending a Medusa creature. I think it's actually Medusa herself. She's sending Medusa to Man's World to turn everyone into stone just so that her daughter will come back to her. That's a little bit of the behavior of a psychopath. So I don't really like Hippolyta here, but I've never really liked Hippolyta. I've always liked Diana more than Hippolyta, but overall, I did like this story. It's not quite as amazing as I was hoping that it would be, but if you're one of those people, you've never really gotten into Wonder Woman and you're looking for something new and different with Wonder Woman, this book is definitely very new and different. It's not really, it's kind of got the very, very broad framework of a lot of other Wonder Woman origin stories, but it takes things in a very different direction. It just didn't go as far and crazy as I was wishing that Grant Morrison would go. But overall, I would give this book like a B-. It's not terrible. It's definitely closer to being great than it is being awful, but it's not fully at great in my opinion. So those are my thoughts on Wonder Woman Earth 1. I hope that you guys liked this video. If you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back later in the week with some other videos. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.